Mayor, you are good to go in about 10 seconds.
Good evening. Welcome to the June 8th, 2020 Board of Commissioners remote meeting for the town of Matthews. I'd like to start by good morning. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the June 8th, 2020 Matthews remote town board meeting. I'd like to start by introducing some of the participants. First, we have our town attorney, Charles Buckley. We have Commissioner Dave Bland, Commissioner Ken McCool, Commissioner John Urban, Commissioner Jeff Miller, Mayor Pro Tem Renee Garner, Town Manager Hazen Blodgett, Commissioner Larry Whitley, and Assistant Town Manager Becky Hawk. And we'll be joined by some other folks. There's Lori Canapino, our town clerk. There you are, Jay Camp, our planning director, Chief of Police Clark Pennington, Communications Director Maureen Keith, and our Fire and EMS Chief Rob Kinnenberg. Due to Mecklenburg County's COVID-19 stay-at-home order, this meeting of the Matthews Board of Commissioners will be conducted remotely using the Zoom virtual meeting platform. Town of Matthews is committed to transparency and robust public participation during these challenging times. I'll remind everyone that the mayor and commissioners will vote on each item by roll call vote, meaning each member will be polled to individually state their vote of record. They will also raise their hand to indicate their vote. I'd like to move on to agenda item number 2, our invocation or moment of reflection with Commissioner McCool.
So today I'm going to read an excerpt from Senator Robert Kennedy's speech after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968. I think after the killing of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and countless others, this has become extremely relative to what we're going through today. What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness, but love and wisdom, and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice towards those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or they be black. We can do well in this country. We will have difficult times. We've had difficult times in the past. We will have difficult times in the future. This is not the end of violence. It is not the end of lawlessness, and it's not the end of disorder. But the vast majority of white people and the vast majority of black people in this country want to live together, want to improve the quality of our life, and want justice for all human beings who abide in our land. Let us dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks wrote so many years ago, to tame the savageness of man and make gentle of the life in this world. Let us dedicate ourselves to that and say a prayer for our country and our people.
Thank you, Commissioner McCool. That is very appropriate during these difficult times. I'd like to now go on to agenda item number 3, the statement of the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let's now receive an update on the COVID-19 from our Emergency Operations Center Commander Rob Kinnenberg. Rob?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Today is day 89 in the EOC. So 3 months we've been dealing with COVID here in Mecklenburg County. As of this evening, we had 5,415 cases in Mecklenburg County and 114 deaths. We continue to struggle with the numbers, especially as we deal with the congregate care community. Cases and deaths are reported to the county that the resident came from. So if you have a Union County resident who is in Carrington, just say, that case may be at Carrington, but that number, that data is recorded for Union County. So it is a little off. So the numbers continue to be a little bit of a challenge. But as far as the numbers for Mecklenburg County go, we're averaging 174 people a day testing positive. That's up from 126 over the last 2 weeks. 62% of that represents a 62% increase in cases and a 50% increase in the death rate attributed to COVID over the same 2 weeks. In essence, we have ramped up our testing. We are casting a wider net. The problem is we are seeing an increase in the percentage of positive test results from that larger population. The last week's percentage was 15% of those tested were positive. 11% increase in the number of COVID patients making it to the hospital or needing hospitalization, and a 33% increase in patients on ventilators. We have frankly lost track of where the curve is at this point. We're not seeing the spike, but we are seeing a slow, gradual increase. So the models are not a good predictor of where the peak of the curve is. Here in Matthews, we have 57 town residents in locations who are in isolation. Again, keep in mind that our goal is to test almost 3 times as many patients as we did a month ago, with our goal of testing 5% of the population. The big question right now is what impact the protests and the gatherings are going to have on the spread of COVID-19. We are 7 days into the marches and protests, so we are in the incubation window. So there is a fear that we will see a spike in COVID positive numbers related to those activities. So just to recap, we did move into phase 1 on May 8th, so 30 days ago. Again, the state's goals were to see better tracking or surveillance of positive patients, to see a decline in lab confirmed cases, a decline in the percentage of tests returning positive, and a decline in hospitalizations. Mecklenburg County has achieved none of those metrics, but it's a statewide system. We did move into phase 2 on May 22nd, and we're referring to that as safer at home. And I'm glad to report there are quite a few people who are still choosing to stay home. Our emphasis continues to be on the at-risk populations, the congregate living communities like nursing homes, but there are also a large number of group homes that are much looser in terms of regulation by the state. So they're trying to get a good track on those situations. Again, our 30-day testing plan was to test 5,500 people. I think you'll see a large increase in that testing. But anecdotally, if you drive by the Novant and the Tryon Partners facilities, we are not seeing the lines of people that we saw 2, 3, or 4 weeks ago at those facilities. In Matthews, again, we continue to work with the EOC on a daily basis. Beth is working with Mecklenburg County Finance on a reimbursement strategy. We did reopen town facilities last week. We brought employees back on a regular basis, and we're trying to resume activities as normally as possible. We have provided disinfectant supplies to each facility, and we're encouraging people to wear masks when they're in public. We continue to emphasize social distancing and environmental controls in the workplace. And Hazen continues to participate with the county manager's business roundtable. Police and fire continue to work with CMPD and CFD on centralized warehousing. and we have police and fire representation in the EOC on a daily basis. So that's the end of my report, unless you have any questions.
I do have a question, Rob. Is there any concern from Mecklenburg County health officials due to these metrics all going in the wrong direction?
Yes, there is concern, Mayor. You know, like I said, we don't know where the spike in the curve is. We track the hospital census on a daily basis, and that's reported to the policy group. I think we've gotten over, the emergency responder community has gotten the PPE we need to deal with and changed our response protocols. The problem still exists in the nursing and congregate care facilities, that they have large numbers of staff members who are affected, and deficiencies in PPE. The state is working to provide them protective equipment as well.
I have another question. Are any of our town employees, have they had COVID?
No, we've had some scares. We've had, and we erred on the side of caution. Anytime a town employee was in contact with someone who exhibited COVID symptoms, we asked that the employee isolate until the affected party had shown no symptoms for at least 7 days.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Miller, did you have a question? You're muted, Jeff.
Thank you. Chief, would you recommend, I have not been tested, would you recommend that I get tested with my wife over at the Novant and by the Siskiyou Y? So that, and do we need to educate or push out more public information about people who have not? We would encourage them to be tested. How do you feel?
What's happening?
I think that's still a difficult question. With the numbers that the county is trying to test, you would think it would get to us, you and your wife, that have experienced no symptoms to date. There is a very large asymptomatic population of COVID patients, though. If you are still self-isolating, still practicing social distancing and wearing a mask, you're probably okay without being tested. But don't say Dr. Rob said that. Also, if you go to a Novant facility, they may still require a referral from your primary care physician to be tested. Anecdotally, the hospitals at the current 2,000 a day testing, they are at the limit of their testing capability through LabCorp and through Novant. So there may be a push for more testing, but there's, then we run into capacity issues.
Thank you.
Commissioner Urban.
As a segue to that, Chief, I don't know if Jeff was talking about the testing for the COVID directly, or is he talking about antibody? But is the county making any conversations about commercializing the antibody test to try and run that gamut as well?
No, I don't believe there's been any conversation among the policy group about doing antibody testing. And the wider the net you cast, I wonder if we are collecting numbers. We have to continue to stress isolation, distancing, mask wearing, and hygiene if we're going to get ahead of this. The conditions we've seen over the last 7 days in downtown Charlotte are completely contra to everything we're trying to accomplish.
Are there any other questions or comments for Chief Kinnenberg? Seeing none, I would just like to reiterate, I've spoke with Hazen on more than one occasion where we've had concerned citizens contact me and say that the numbers that we're reporting and the numbers in some of these nursing homes, et cetera, don't jive. And I think the reason is exactly what Chief Kinnenberg said initially, is because it goes back to their residents. So some of the numbers may actually be higher in some of the locations in Matthews, but they're not counted here. They're counted wherever the patients actually come from. So I think we need to, if you get asked that question, that's why there's some difference in those numbers. All right, if we have nothing else for Chief Kinnenberg, thank you, Chief. Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
I just want to be careful in saying, you know, the protests and demonstrations going on, we haven't seen those numbers yet. So the numbers and the increase that we're seeing are likely related to Memorial Day celebrations in phase 2, safer at home reopening.
Thank you. Move on to agenda item number 5. Are there any items to be added to the agenda, Mr. Town Manager?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on to item 6, public comment. Lori, do we have anyone that signed up for public comment tonight?
Yes, we do have 2 public commenters, Mr. Lane Ware and Mr. Jerry Withrow. Mr. Ware, we are ready to go in just a moment. As soon as the countdown timer starts, you may begin.
Hello, my name is Lane Ware. I'm a resident of Plantation Estates. We moved here in October of 2017. The first few months, we were very pleased with our decision. When COVID-19 first appeared on our shores, we began in early March to take all recommended steps to mitigate the spread of this flu. I began taking my temperature twice a day, wearing gloves when I went to the grocery store, liberal use of hand sanitizer, washing my hands much more often, and reducing my trips off campus from 20 to 5 or 6 per week. I was not concerned about contracting the flu, but I would be devastated if I brought that flu onto our campus. On April 3rd, ACTS imposed restrictions on independent residents by not allowing them to leave campus for any reason, including essential medical procedures, unless on return they were restricted to their apartments for 14 days. These restrictions far exceeded any governmental requirements or recommendations. At the same time, 600 staff are permitted to come and go 5 days a week or more with a temperature check and answering a few questions. My 16-year-old granddaughter may come and go as she wishes. These restrictions are imposed by a corporate management in suburban Philadelphia, where ACTS has a dozen communities with multiple cases and fatalities. The Philadelphia metropolitan area has 5 to 8 times the incidence of COVID-19 compared to Matthews. And more attorneys than Charlotte has landscapers, HVAC contractors, and construction personnel combined. Liability is driving these corporate decisions. We've contacted legal representation and they estimated it would take a year to litigate our case. I filed a complaint online with the Justice Department with a proviso that it would take 90 days before they contacted me. I turned to the town of Matthews to take whatever actions they can to eliminate this discriminatory policy that restricts my freedoms as a citizen of Matthews, North Carolina, and the United States of America.
Wow.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ware. Lori, do we have another speaker?
No comments otherwise? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Ware, I'm sorry, Mr. Lane.
It's
Mr.
Lane Ware.
Lane
Right.
Ware, sorry, I got you.
No worries.
Somebody from the town will get back to you. We're not going to have an open dialogue about your concern tonight, but we will have someone from the town get back to you to see if there's anything the town can do to help you with your concern.
Thank you.
Promise.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ware. We'll move on.
Our second speaker is Mr. Jerry Withrow. Mr. Withrow, once the timer is reset and begins at 4 minutes, you'll be ready to go.
It says a minute now. Should I wait?
Yes, sir, please, if you can wait until it's reset, give us just a moment to do that.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor Higdon and members of the Board of Commissioners. I'm going to change direction on this conversation. I'm Jerry Withrow, and I'd like to lodge a complaint about excessive trash and old cars on 2 properties on Morningwood Drive. Just for orientation, the community is Eastwood Forest. Morningwood Drive is a connector street between East John Street and Pleasant Plains Road in South Matthews. I own 6 lots along Morningwood Drive. I also own a 20-acre parcel which abuts the backyard boundaries of 25 of the 33 lots on the north side of Morningwood Drive. The properties I'm complaining about are 4706 Morningwood Drive and 4712 Morningwood Drive. Both properties are titled in the name of Mr. Everett Wilson, who is now deceased, and his elderly widowed wife, Wilma Wilson, who doesn't live there. Their son, Darren Wilson, lives in 4706, and another son lives in did live in 4712, but is now, I believe, in prison, I believe, for drug charges, but his wife is living in the home now. My complaint: both of these properties are just a total disgrace to the whole Eastwood Forest community and to Matthews itself. Today, I drove by again. I counted 5 vehicles and a partly loaded flatbed trailer in the front yard, and these are 1/4-acre lots, in the front yard of 4712 Morningwood Drive. The truck was partially covered with canvas, implying that it hadn't been used in a while. I'm not sure if the other vehicles are used or not. In 4706 Morningwood Drive, the front yard had 1 car, 1 truck, 1 van, 1 boat, an old tire, old furniture, and other miscellaneous junk, in my opinion, junk. And that's in the front yard, not to mention the backyards, which are total disaster as well. I've spoken to Mr. Carlo McCoy in the Zone Ordinance Compliance Department, Matthews, several times, as recently as 4 o'clock this afternoon. Mr. McCoy is fully aware of the deplorable situation of the properties I'm referring to. He told me that he can suggest that they clean up the properties, but he says he has little or no way to enforce his request to the property owners, who have consistently ignored previous notices from Mr. McCoy's compliance department and from his predecessors. I encourage each of you, on the commissioners and Mr. Mayor, to drive by the property on Morningwood Drive. It's obvious which properties I'm referring to without even looking at the addresses. I would like for you to ask yourself, and be, in all honesty, is this the kind of place you would want to live? And is it the kind of place that you want to represent as a member of the leading council for Matthews? Eastwood Forest is an affordable housing community, yet affordable housing doesn't have to look trashy like this does. There are many good, responsible, retired persons and families living in this community. They should not have to put up with this kind of situation among their neighbors. I spoke with one resident today, Mrs. Marge Owens at 4705 Morningwood Drive. She told me she hates looking out her window and seeing such horrible trash across the street from her. She told me, she said, "I've been living here for 30 years. I've complained to the town many times and nothing ever gets done." I believe that you, Mr. Mayor, and Board of Commissioners have an opportunity here to provide this community a great service by making sure this problem gets resolved. It would be an improvement to the whole community of Eastwood Forest and to Matthews as a whole. Thank you for your time and consideration of this request.
Congratulate you, Mr. Withrow, on taking up almost exactly 4 minutes. That was good timing. We don't normally respond to public comment, but Hazen, do you have any comment from Mr. Withrow regarding this complaint?
Yeah, we can certainly check into it tomorrow. Jay's on the call too, so we will talk to Carlo and check it out and enforce the code if it needs to be enforced.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I'm doing everything I can do to help clean up the community because I'm all for a clean community.
Thank you, sir. Well, let's move on to agenda item number 7. I'll entertain a motion to recess the regular meeting for public hearings on applications to amend the United Development Ordinance and land use map of the town of Matthews.
So moved.
A motion by Commissioner McCool. Do I have a second?
I do.
Seconded by Commissioner Whitley. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland? Is that a yay? You're muted. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley,
Yes.
Commissioner McCool,
Yes.
and Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Must be in his closet. There you go.
Sorry, I'm
And
sorry.
I vote yes as well, so that passes unanimously. We'll move on to the first item, item A, zoning application 2020-710 Interpeaks to change the text in the UDO table 505.2-7 to add P under the B3 zoning district to allow indoor commercial recreation not otherwise listed as a permitted use in the B3 zoning district. This is continued from April 13th, 2020. And who is Jay, are you going to address this, or Mary Jo?
Yes, Mayor, I can address. We've received a request for a deferral from the property owner to July 13th due to various issues related to COVID-19.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to defer to our July 13th, 2020 meeting. Or
I'll
not.
go ahead and make that
Mayor,
motion, Mr.
Mayor,
Mayor.
entitle that continue.
I'll make that
Not-
continuance. I'll
Yeah.
go ahead and make a motion that we, per the applicant's request, open the public hearing and continue to July 13th, 2020. That is application number 2020-710.
Thank you, Commissioner Urban. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Whitley. We'll once again do a roll call vote. Remember to unmute when I call on you. Commissioner Bland.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley.
Yes.
Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so that passes unanimously. We will continue this one until July 13th. Moving on to 7B, zoning application 2020-711 Christ Life Church to change the conditions in that certain BHCD district located at 1641 Matthews Township Parkway and being the Christ Life Church property and further designated as tax parcels 193-292-23 and 23E to allow bathrooms, banquets, or meeting/catering halls as a permitted use. This was also continued from our April 13th meeting. Again, Jay, do you wanna-
Same deal. This is a continuance request to July 13th.
I have a question for Jay, please.
Yes, sir.
Jay, the reason for all these continuances is, to be clear, is due to COVID-19 and they can't have the community meetings, et cetera. Is that accurate?
You know, if I had to summarize, there's been some difficulties. Some applicants have successfully held either, I think, outdoor on-site meetings or Zoom community meetings. Some applicants are experiencing financial difficulties, and they have legal representation, and they're hitting the pause button. So, I mean, Mary Jo, unless you can add anything else, that's how I would summarize the two main issues causing the continuances.
Yes, I agree with Mr. Camp.
Thank you. Do you feel it'll snowball and catch up to us to where it'll be regrettable or manageable? How do you guys feel it's going to end up?
I was going to just say on this Christ Life, being a banquet hall, they really aren't able to serve right now. So
Yeah.
they'll eventually get everything going. Most of the two, this one and the Home Depot, they're not complete new zonings. They're just minor changes on them. So I don't think it'll snowball. Yes, we'll probably have a lot in one meeting, yeah.
Thank
Jay?
Yeah, we've not received a lot of new cases in addition to what we've already got under our pending zoning. So we don't have like 5 new public hearings for next month on top of this. So hopefully it's manageable.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Yeah. Otherwise, we might want to have one of those meetings that goes till one or two in the morning.
Yeah.
I'll
Mr.
entertain
Mayor.
a yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion, but you in reading that, you did indicate that there was a bathroom, it's a ballroom, but I will make a motion to continue zoning application 2020-711 Christ Life Church until July 13th meeting 2020.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Whitley, a second by Commissioner Urban, and I've turned my lights up so I can read a little better. Appreciate that. We'll once again do a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland,
Yes.
Commissioner Urban,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner McCool,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
and I also vote yes, so that passes unanimously. We will continue zoning application 2020-711 until our 7/13 meeting. We'll move on to item 7C, zoning application 2020-712, Family Investments LLC, to change the zoning from O to RVS on that certain property located on North Fremont Street, across the street from 313 and 317 North Fremont Street, and being designated as tax parcel 19327-121.
Also a continuation to July 13th.
Entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion that we continue the application 2020-712, the Mars Family Investments, to July 13th, 2020.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Urban, a second by Commissioner Miller. We'll do a roll call vote once again. Commissioner Bland,
Yes.
Commissioner Urban,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley,
Yes.
Commissioner McCool,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. That passes unanimously. We will continue zoning application 2020-712 until our 7/13 meeting. Move on to item 7D, zoning application 2020-713 Home Depot. Change the conditions in that certain B1 SCD shopping center district, commonly known as the Home Depot, and located at 1827 Matthews Township Parkway, and further designated as tax parcel 19323-133. Jay, tell us a story about this one.
It's a continuation to 7/13, our last of the evening.
We have a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion again that we take zoning application 2020-713 Home Depot to continue the hearing until July 13th, 2020.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Urban, a second by Commissioner Whitley. We'll do a roll call vote once again. Commissioner Bland, how do you vote, sir?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner McCool,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So zoning application 2020-713 Home Depot will be continued to our meeting on July 13th. Let's move on to 7E. Motion 2020-1, text change. The text to revise the standards for outdoor illumination. Mary Jo, I believe you're going to present this.
Mayor, thank you, and good evening, everyone.
Good
First,
evening. Good
Let
evening.
me interrupt for just a moment. Mary Jo, I believe you have control, so see if you can move the screen.
okay.
There you go.
No, oh, there we go.
There
Okay,
you go.
thank you, Jay.
All right.
All
You're all
right,
set.
thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge a couple of our staff members who diligently worked on this text amendment for our outdoor lighting illumination chapter in the UDO, and that's Susan Habina Willard and Rob Will. And also Jonathan Wells started this process for us last summer when he was interning for the town. Again, before you this evening is the UDO text amendment for outdoor illumination. We've noticed over the several years some irregularities within the chapter, plus some modernization that needed to happen in this section of the UDO. It's only 8 pages long, so in general, What we have changed is wattage to lumens throughout the chapter, lighting to illumination throughout the chapter, and instead of lighting plan references, we've changed it to illumination plans. On page 1, you'll find some general grammar changes, some definition additions, and we removed, excuse me, I've got ahead of myself here. My mouse is not cooperating. And we removed a portion to another section of the UDO, of the chapter. On page 2, again, some additional definitions that have been added, such as street lighting units, and some clarification in the watts. And we have removed this section F. It is redundant, and it is also referenced later on in the chapter. On page 3, we have added, the landscaping and the lighting plan or illumination plan must be added in with the landscaping plan with development, so we can verify the separation of lights to trees when new development comes into town, whether it be a subdivision or a commercial development. We have also reduced down at here, we have reduced the spill of lighting over property lines. We've reduced it to half in a lot of those areas. So that is also changed. Again, page 4, majority is changing from wattage to lumens. On page 5, we have added outdoors lighting for sports, and I'm sorry, my mouse is not really working well with this. And we've also included that strobe lighting is also not allowed within the town. On page 6, again, lighting to illumination. We moved the exterior lighting out. On page 7, we started clarifying at the end of page 7 the requirements for residential neighborhoods. All this area here was not in the ordinance previously. And when we've gone, when staff has reviewed subdivisions and new developments that have come into town, we have had to take common sense and used what has been used in other communities and put that to play. This gives us something for the developers to look at, for the lighting folks, that this is what Matthews wants for our standards. And there's some specifics in there about the height of the poles within a residential subdivision, full cutoff requirements, distance between poles, and areas of public assembly. I know that's a quick overview of what we've changed. And I'll be open to any questions, and Miss Susan is also on the line to answer any technical questions that I may not be able to answer.
So would you, I guess, Mary Jo, if you still have control, can you put it back into presentation where I can see everyone and take the presentation off? Thank you. So hopefully you had an opportunity to read over. There is a lot of stuff there. I hope it'll clarify our lighting requirements here in Matthews. I'm very happy to see strobe lights disallowed, because I've seen some in other communities that are really distracting when you're driving particularly. Are there any comments or questions for Susan or Mary Jo? Commissioner Urban.
Mary Jo, under 155.609.7, the reduction in foot candles along the residential property line or a commercial property line, what precipitated cutting that 1 foot candle in half and the 2 foot candles in half?
I'm going to ask Susan to respond to that because that's more of a technical portion.
Sure thing, no problem. I appreciate the question. So in other communities I worked in, it was much lower than what we have in Matthews. And especially as it pertains to residential, many times you see 0 on the property line for residential. I thought taking it from 1 to 0 might be too much of a shock. It might be difficult for our customers. So I thought taking it from 1 to a half would cause the least amount of hardship to anyone who was doing a lighting plan, and not, bring it all the way down to 0. Commercial properties, if you think of it, you've got one property that's got 2 foot candles spill over to the other one, and then adjacent one's got 2 foot candles spill over for a conglomerate of 4 on the property line, which might be okay. That might be fine. But the brighter we get everything, the less we are for like just any reflectivity that's coming off of any vertical surfaces.
I'd like to know where Charlotte's at. I think Charlotte actually might be a 1/10 of a foot candle, but I guess I'd like to get an example of where this may occur, because in my opinion, commercial to commercial and just the level of safety and security around the larger property, the higher foot candles probably make sense. I think you could make that call to reduce it to the residential line. But again, I'd sort of like to see an example of where that might occur, then we can make a better determination. I don't mind dropping it, but I also know going through newer neighborhoods and seeing new regulations, both on the Mecklenburg County side and other counties, we're losing some of the safety value in this lighting as well. I know there's a concern about dark sky, but we've prevented a lot of that through the use of full cutoff. But full cutoff also eliminates a lot of the illumination that the fixture was designed for as well. So I'd just be curious if what Mecklenburg County is doing and what we have an example of residential next to commercial and an application of that, because it seems like 1 foot candle is pretty low to begin with, but I just sort of want to vet that a little bit further.
Absolutely, we can certainly look into that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Susan or Mary Jo? Jay, can you introduce the planning board? And I'd like to ask if they have any questions as well.
Yeah, I was thinking we didn't go through that normal process. I believe on the call tonight, we've got Carrie Lamson, Jana Reeve, Natasha Edwards, and Mike Foster. So do you all have anything to add? You'd like to add?
Seeing
no questions here.
Very good. All right, so Mary Jo, the purpose of this was just a public hearing, essentially.
Yes, it's like any rezoning. It will now, the board will have to forward it to the planning board to review and vet additionally later this month. And then it'll come back to your board for decision in July.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to echo the comments made about our staff going through that. It's some very technical and tricky language, and it's not easy. So we appreciate the meticulous nature of going through all that. I'll now entertain a motion to reconvene our regular meeting.
Mayor, I believe we need to open it up for public comment or remind the public that they can comment within a 24-hour period. Is that correct, Lori?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, we didn't have anyone who wished to make a public comment now, but Mayor, if you could do that reminder, thank you.
Yes, so if anybody in the public would like to comment on our suggested text changes for elimination, our UDO, please, you have 24 hours to make your comment. Thank you. Does that suffice?
Perfect.
Okay, let's move on then to, I'll entertain a motion to reconvene our regular meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner McCool, seconded by Commissioner Miller. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley? Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. So now we are back into our regular meeting. We'll move on to agenda item number 9, planning and development business. We'll receive a report from the planning board from Mr. Camp.
Thank you, Mayor. We had 4 items on the agenda. The first being a public improvement variance from PCM Holdings along the unopened College Street right-of-way. And the request is for a deviation from the standard street cross section and to not install curb and gutter. The board debated this and recommended approval of the public improvement variance, and you all will be discussing this here momentarily. And then for information only, we had a very good presentation on the ongoing sub-area travel demand and land use model. A very spirited discussion with our planning board, and then the two primary consultants, Dana Stujanki, presented information here. There was an administrative amendment from Quick Trip. They were having facade issues with some tile on their building. They're requesting to cover or replace the tile with some panels or and perhaps EFIS. Very minor request, did not impact the brick facade of the building. And then finally, request was approved. That was approved. And then also a request was approved for the addition of a columbarium at Matthews United Methodist Church. The site is sort of to the rear of the property. There will be a reflective memorial garden, and then the niche structures will be installed by the church. So that was our planning board meeting. Any questions?
Okay, seeing no questions, we'll go right into item 9B1, the public improvement variance for PCM Holdings on College Street. Mary Jo will present.
Thank you, Mayor. The PCM Holding is looking to develop 4 lots along College Street by right. The property is currently zoned R12 and will remain R12. The applicant is seeking relief from the standard 50-foot road cross section. There is a 65-foot unimproved public right-of-way along this section of College Street. It has been, never has been accepted by the town because it's never been developed. Matthews UDO requires sidewalk, curb, and gutter improvements to be constructed by the developer. The local limited cross section that the relief is being requested specifies the following: 9-foot travel lanes, 2.5-foot curb and gutter, 4-foot planting strip, and 5-foot sidewalk. PCM Holdings, again, is proposing to build a 20-foot wide street with no curb nor gutter, 5-foot wide sidewalk along the side that the houses will be constructed on, and a roadside swale to carry stormwater runoff. In addition, a hammerhead turnaround will be installed at the end of the development. A couple things for the board to note, that planning and public works staff have met with the developer several times and are comfortable with this and feel it matches the rest of the area for roads within that proximity of College Street. There was a similar public improvement variance on Jefferson Street that was approved in 2017. Once the improvements are completed, this portion of College Street will then have to be, the developer will have to present it to be accepted to the town. So the town will be eventually, if this is approved, if the variance is approved, then the board will have to accept this portion of the road as is. Jay, if you can scroll down, please. So this drawing shows the 4 lots that are going to be developed by right again. It shows the sidewalk and the road and the hammerhead turnaround. And if you'll go to the next shot, Jay. Thank you. Now this is reversed from where we were looking. And so this does not go all the way through from Ames to Jefferson. So it does stop at a portion of College Street.
Right here.
Yes, if you'll show right there, thank you. And this aerial is provided so you could see the rest of the neighborhood streets there that show that there's some streets don't have sidewalks on both sides. There's a lot of streets that don't have curb and gutter. So it without the curb and gutter, travel should be slower. Folks will be slower driving through their area. This is not going to be a cut through. And the applicant representative is here, Mr. Wes Hinson, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a disclosure.
Yes, Commissioner Urban.
I don't think it's to the level of an excusal or recusal, but I'll have Charlie listen to this. Mr. Hinson is the attorney representing the ABC board in Indian Trail, from which my firm entered a contract in with the ABC board for another project. So I just wanted to make that full disclosure, realizing that Wes Hinson is an attorney who contracts with a lot of folks and negotiates with a lot of folks.
Absolutely no conflict, and there's no ethical conflict either.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you for that disclosure, Commissioner Urban. Commissioner Miller, did you have a question or a comment?
I do, thank you. My question is, will the street be a hammerhead dead end forever? Or does it have the potential to connect to another street in the future?
Staff looked at trying to find some creative ways for funding to get it to go through to complete the rest of the street. But unfortunately, right now, there is no funding available. But yes, it is the intention that this would hopefully be completed street.
Is it already designed in a grid pattern?
Let's see.
I'm not.
It's coming off of a curve, but I
Yes.
believe it's designed to be a grid pattern. I was confused by the reversal of north and south on the photograph and the drawings.
Yeah, I apologize. We should have flipped that drawing for you. But yeah, it's technically what you would call a grid. It's, it's going to stop right there where the arrow is on the screen for now. But yes, we would anticipate that in the future being fully completed.
To the bottom right of that cursor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Jo, is there something that needs to be incorporated in a language in order that that street may eventually go through, or is it just we know that that could possibly happen?
And I'll ask.
You want me to interrupt here?
Sure.
The rest of the street would still remain an unopened yet dedicated street, but it would still remain unopened. The portion of the town doesn't accept now doesn't mean that someone else could come in and by some kind of 20-year involvement take it away from us. It still would be available ultimately for the town to accept the balance of that street.
Yeah, and in other locations where we've had subdivisions that have dead-ended, where we know we would like them to connect to the next parcel, we've put up signs saying that this will eventually be at the hammerhead or at the dead end. We've put up signs saying that this will eventually be a through. So I think that would be appropriate in this location also.
I would agree, because we're lacking in connectivity, and this is important.
Yes.
So the only commissioner I can see right now is Commissioner Urban. So if others have questions, please speak up.
I would like some language in there where I'm sure they've had a community meeting with the landowners of the hammerhead to the right and left. And I really think that the street, I'm not sure how many feet it is to the next intersection, but I think that signage is needed, or a cut through or a throughway is needed on that hammerhead or at that hammerhead.
Are you requesting the signage or some additional information, Mr. Miller?
I think more information. I don't want to create a dead end with a hammerhead. I'm not intimate with the property on the right or the left, if it's a single family home or an additional lot. So if it's an additional lot, I really think that road should be punched through.
It is not. Those are two separate property owners at the that are over there, and the one has a house that's been on the property for a while. The other one is a new resident that is going to be building. And Mr. Hinson is here on the call. I'm not sure if he's had any luck contacting them or not.
Mr. Henson?
You know, we've reached out to one of the gentlemen who owns, I believe at one point owned both sides, and had some discussion with those folks. It's a gentleman who is developing a few pieces of property, a few parcels down at the end of, what's that street, John? The end of Jefferson Street, the very end of Jefferson Street. And it's my understanding right now, he just isn't in a position to move forward with his piece. Certainly has no objection to what we're doing, but in terms of participation, I don't think he's a participant in the construction of that remaining, what I believe to be about 200 feet of road. He's similarly situated with the town, I think, at this point.
I think his verbiage is there, that the road is a cut through, and Charlie has assured us that that will remain. That will be a valuable piece of property in the future with two corner lots. So I as long as that's still in there, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
And you know, to speak to that road, the unopened College Street has been on Matthews Plat since 1923, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also agree with the town attorney. I don't think it's going anywhere.
Okay.
So I need one of the commissioners that are particularly clever to come up with a proposal on this one. Just
Mr. Hinson, did you want to give your presentation if the board wants to hear it?
You know, I'm excited to be one of the few on the agenda that did not request a continuance. So I feel like we're in front of the game there, easing your schedule for the 16th. I think Mary Jo's presentation was exactly accurate. We're looking to keep it in the same fashion as the Jefferson Street variance that was approved. I think most streets in that network downtown are 18 feet. This is 20. There are no curbs and gutters, but there's no curb and gutter system to attach to on either end. It's not an intersection, neither on Ames nor Fremont. So there's, you know, I don't believe there is anything to do with traffic at either end that would make it more complicated. So it is a 20-foot wide street, 4 foot planting strip, and 5-foot pedestrian sidewalk on the house side. And again, you can see it's 4 lots that are already there by right, same size as what would already be present in that area of downtown Matthews.
Commissioner Miller.
I'd like to make a motion to approve PCM Holdings' request for College Street public improvement variance and allow construction of a 20-foot wide street with sidewalk construction on the southeast side of the street, roadside swale, and turnaround as submitted.
That cover everything, Mary Jo?
Just the addition of the signage at the end of the.
And that it includes signage that this could be a future right-of-way or continuation of a road, so that the people who buy the houses understand that, buy the homes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion by Commissioner Miller. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner McCool. We'll do a roll call vote again. Commissioner Bland,
Yes.
Commissioner Urban,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley, Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Not me.
I'm sorry, Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
Now it passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, commissioners and staff.
Thank you, Mr. Henson. Move on to agenda item number 10, the consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda items 10A through 10C.
Second.
Commissioner Miller, we have a second?
Yes.
Second by Commissioner Urban. We'll do a roll call vote. I think this is the shortest consent agenda I've seen in ever. Okay, we'll start the roll call vote. Commissioner Bland,
Yes.
Commissioner Urban,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley, Commissioner Whitley, you're muted, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
and all the way on the end there, Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. The consent agenda is passed. We'll move on to item 11, unfinished business. The first one, consider service flag request for Matthews Veterans Advisory Committee from Chairman Tom Cannon.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, I'll take this one. Pretty straightforward. We went back and looked at really several issues. One of them is cost, staff cost. We've put that in the memo. Those are, as you'd call, sunk or captured costs. Just wanted to let everybody know the estimated time that we thought it would take. We've advised Mr. Cannon and whoever's the point person on this on make sure we got the ADA covered from an obstruction standpoint. They got to get permission from Duke Energy, and then the possible use of tourism funds, and talking to the attorney did not feel like it met that standard. So we're recommending approving this, and then just make sure, provided that the ADA issues are addressed and Duke Power gives permission, and that MVAC's going to work with Duke Energy.
Okay, are there any questions or comments?
I'd like to make a suggestion. At the last presentation, this project was dependent upon a gift from a donor. And I believe that covers the cost of having American-made materials. I would like to find out if it's possible for the town to cover that cost. It was $600 or $700. I don't have it in front of me, but so that's a question for the town. If the board would be willing to vote for that, and also what the cost was from the town.
Is Mr. Cannon is he in this meeting?
He is.
I don't know. Tom, could you refresh our memories on the cost of the flags?
Tom, you may be muted.
The cost, labor and equipment to implement was $1,340.
Yes, but I believe per Mayor Pro Tem Garner's suggestion that MVAC had expended all of their funds and were dependent on a donor for some additional funding, or donors.
We did have a donor. We do have a donor. If you can hear me.
Yes,
we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, we do have a donor. The original cost for the flags themselves for the first 4 sets was $965. I think we were getting them from Condor. They were American made. There was a donation of $760. There will be a donation of $765 from a local Matthews citizen. if the town would take that cost for us, NVAC would be very appreciative. The fixtures and the poles for the first 4 sets was about $2,700. Basically, what that would do was take our current budget for this fiscal year and consume it, plus a number of other donation money that we've had in years past. So I applaud the Mayor Pro Tem's suggestion that they add the donation to cover the donation for most of the cost of the first set of flags. That would be excellent.
I mean, I think we've talked about supporting American made, and we all generally agreed to go in that direction. So it would be
that is so, ma'am. And these are American made, American materials. So I think that we've got that covered.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I did some research about the tourism fund usage, and without reading it verbatim, in the past, we have used tourism funds for banners that are hung on poles and promote town events. And we have added Memorial Day and Veterans Day as town events during my tenure. Higdon and I pushed for those. And I think we could use prior use of the funds on banners for town events as potential precedent. And so I'm in contrast with the recommendation from Attorney Charlie Buckley. Charlie, can you explain to me why this is so different? Because veterans from Indian Trail, Mint Hill, and adjoining communities are coming to the events that we have.
Well, Commissioner Miller, the main thing is all the banners that we do for everything else and all the other areas where we've used or utilized the funds from the tourism funding have been a draw from outsiders. The flags and the flag events is a wonderful community standard. It's a wonderful community event, but a community event is not the standard for the expenditure of tourism funds. It is for funds to promote tourism. Now, one of these days, maybe this event with all the flags will rise to the level, such as Matthews Alive. That brings in folks from all over the country, quite frankly. Beach Fest, all of these things that have banners that you're talking about, they could bring in a great draw from outside. People do put heads in beds, people do eat here. And until this community event becomes a draw from outside, it's still a magnificent community event, but it just doesn't fit tourism. It fits community event, yes, but community event is not the standard for tourism funding.
Charlie, while we're discussing that, I know that I sent town manager and some others some photographs of banners that I saw in Chester, South Carolina, that show a photograph of all of the fallen heroes from that town, and they hang those up over Memorial Day. Are you saying that also would not be eligible for tourism funds?
Until the event itself is a draw for outsiders, it's a magnificent event. You can still use town funds, you just couldn't use tourism funds until it reaches the level of a tourism project or a tourism draw from outside.
I have a question.
I'm sorry, Commissioner McCool?
So, I mean, is there like a threshold of number because at Memorial Day, I spoke to a few people who are from Columbia, South Carolina, who came to our Memorial Day event. So those are tourists. I mean, do we have to have like 10 people come in? I mean,
No,
still tourists.
How many stayed in a motel?
I didn't ask that question.
You know, that's the thing. How many stayed in a motel? How many had lunch or dinner in Matthews? It's just got to be where you're bringing people in who will be utilizing the hospitality industry. And there's no question the Beach Fest does. There's no question the Matthews Alive does. And right now, I don't think that this community event, as magnificent as it is, and as patriotic as it is, has risen to the level of tourism. It is still a great community event, but I think you need to use other funds from the town if you do that, not tourism funds.
At the end of the day, we're talking about a relatively low number for these banners and potentially other ones that we might purchase in the future. Hazen, would you care to answer Mayor Pro Tem Garner's question?
Commissioner, would you ask that question again, please?
I think my question for the town was answered. It was 765. My question was for the board if they would consider, supporting that motion.
So I guess if the question, Mayor, is can the town afford that? Yes, we could afford it. Doesn't rise to the tourism funds level. I would ask that the MVAC get the invoice to us for the end of the fiscal year. I mean, it's a tight budget next year, but we did appropriate $2,500 for this group. So that would be my ask, to get the invoice in before the end of the fiscal year, so we could find money in this whatever, by the end of June, so we could find the money in this year's budget.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner, would you like to make a motion, or did you already? I'm sorry if you did, but could you restate it?
Well, I didn't make a formal motion. My motion was that, should I do it all at once?
Sure.
Okay, let me get my agenda back up. My motion is to approve the service flag request from the Matthews Veteran Advisory Committee. And in addition to that, cover the cost that was being contributed by a Matthews resident, so the flags can be an American-made product.
Second.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Garner, a second by Commissioner Miller. Is there any discussion? Can we put the full view back up, please? Do a roll call vote. As soon as I fix my screen here, thank you. Commissioner Bland, how do you vote, sir?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so that passes unanimously. Thank you. Let's go on to item 11B. Consider the use of parklets on public rights of way for temporary restaurant seating. Mr. Camp.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we talked about last week, we brought to you the concept of not really creating permanent parklets, but temporary outdoor dining for restaurants and food and beverage establishments in Matthews. As you know, under phase 2 that Chief Ginneberg was talking about, part of the reopening plan caps restaurant occupancy at 50%. Many communities around the country are implementing measures to allow restaurants to find ways to have additional seating, because, quite honestly, even at 50%, a lot of businesses, a lot of restaurants can't make ends meet. I mean, restaurants really depend on those tables being full. So in the next page, I'll get to in just a moment, we have crafted a resolution for your board to review and consider this evening. Part of that would be, part A, I'll say, is the extension into the public right-of-way in downtown for businesses or restaurants really that are, I will say, patio challenged, that don't have other areas to allow patrons. The 4 businesses you'll see here at the end of paragraph 2, Sante, Stumptown Station, Portrait Gallery, and Royal Cafe. Those are the ones that first I think came out of this. There may be others that you all have thought about, but many of our businesses downtown, many of the restaurants have quite generous patios. The second aspect of this would be for restaurants townwide. It would allow a 25% reduction in required on-site parking. This would generally be near or adjacent to the entrance to the building due to alcohol permitting purposes. There would be a quick sketch or site plan that would need to be submitted to staff so that we can review each of these proposals for safety concerns. I will say Susan and I had a great conversation with Adam Reed at Sante. Very, very interested in this process, wants to know when it can get underway. Also spoke with one of the owners of Royal Cafe. If you've ever been there, they have I think, two tables out front, so they were also very excited. You'll see under the proposed solution here that we're considering the uses of up to 2 on-street spaces. So we want to be cognizant of not taking up too much of the on-street parking. It is a commodity downtown. Let's see.
Jay, it would also allow sidewalk opportunities.
It does. And part of that approval process, thank you, Charlie, we've got to maintain proper sidewalk clearance for pedestrians to pass. And then there is the safety aspect of this. And I will reference Commissioner Miller's comment last week about the big orange barriers. I know one of the photos I showed had the entire streetscape, multiple parking spaces lined with these barriers. As we've evaluated it, we believe it still may be necessary to implement some of those, probably not that much, but a barrier maybe complemented by some planters. Mr. Ramser has indicated we have a dozen planters that can be relocated for the purposes of defining the space. The barriers would need to be rented by the business owner. I've discussed this with Charlie. The town cannot foot that cost. The estimate is roughly $100 a month to rent one of these. And to refresh everybody's memory, these water barriers, they're essentially the temporary concrete barriers you see on the interstate due to road construction. It's essentially a plastic version of that filled with water. But to protect the folks dining in these parking spaces, that we feel that may be necessary for safety purposes. And then finally, the time frame. I would anticipate we would do these approvals on a rolling 30-day calendar. And then as phase 2 moves along, we would evaluate and see where the state is in its reopening plan. And apologies for the last minute nature. I know that you all just have seen this today. And thank you to both Lori and Charlie for drafting this remotely. I know that it was a lot to put together for both of you, so thank you. But this essentially puts in resolution form just about everything I've just said. So happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
You go back to the participant view, please.
Sure.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I support the concept and would be happy to make a motion. However, the question of the planters, if we already have planters on the sidewalks and we might be opening up the sidewalks and the parking, but the parking area, seating area needs a barrier. Could the planters be moved to the parking for this purpose? I guess there's a cost to this. How can we get past that without doing orange?
So and I'll defer to Susan if she wants to give you a more technical answer on this, but the planters, that would be something we can do with the backhoe. We can pick those up and move those to define the space. They're probably not sufficient. They create visual separation, but from a safety perspective, if a car were to strike them, they're probably not completely sufficient for that safety that we need. Susan, did you want to add anything to that? I probably muddled that quite a bit.
Oh, that was quite good.
Okay.
And, I'm not familiar with how those were constructed to, the crash barriers provide a known crash rating, right? Not that vehicles will be hitting them head on, but there is that level of sense of that they would provide protection. But also it's a number of planters. If we have 4 locations and only a dozen planters, but we would need maybe 4 or 5 to mark off a space, and we're providing the planters to some businesses, then we wouldn't be able to provide it to others. I think that was also a concern as well, as running out of the planters that would be able to be moved.
What about the new police barricades that we saw the other day?
Oh, go ahead, Hazen.
Well, it sounds like I mentioned it to the chief as well. He would like to hold those in abeyance just because times are a little turmoil-ish right now. That's what he told me, Susan. I don't know if he told you something different.
So I spoke with Captain Terrell about that because I thought I had heard from the chief that that was a different type of device as well, which Captain Terrell confirmed. They're more for head-on, like barricading off an entire street, and not this side swipe kind of situation that we would have in more of a linear application.
So I've got a question. So I'm a little confused. I guess the proposal is that we would use water barriers and planters. Is that correct?
That's the initial, I guess, idea. We've come from an on-site visit on Thursday. Susan, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, it could just be done with all barriers, right? But we heard Mr. Miller's concern about like the visual and the aesthetics. And so we were trying to strike a compromise. You know, the barriers could be anchored by the planters, maybe one in between.
Okay.
Mr. Ramser offered to paint them if it, you know, it didn't quite look right, or they looked, you know, chipped or whatever once they got installed. And I think that's how the planters come into play. We don't have to use the planters. It was just an attempt at trying to make them a little bit, these barricades, a little more visually appealing.
And I do have a follow-up to that. The cost, the rental cost of $100, how was that determined?
We pulled up some quotes from some websites where we have suppliers that we frequently use to rent. Assistant Public Works Director Life Fitzpatrick helped with that as well. So $100 per device per month is just an average of what we found. It could vary.
I guess my concern is the town isn't necessarily making money on this enterprise, correct? We're just covering our costs.
So the businesses would need to rent the barriers individually. The town would not be renting them.
Okay, so they're renting them from a third party.
Correct.
Now I understand. Very good.
Commissioner
Miller.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution of the town of Matthews granting the extension of outdoor dining into the public right of way and into required on-site parking, with the addition of the safety barriers that they will be responsible for, and we will work with them to achieve.
Motion by Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner McCool. Are there any questions or comments before we vote? Commissioner Urban.
Yeah, Jay, how are you picking winners and losers regarding the locations? How does that work out?
In terms of which businesses we would be working with, or?
Yes.
So as I was mentioning earlier, I mean, many of our restaurants downtown have patios. Some have, actually some have off-street parking. Grace O'Malley's, they have a parking lot, Jekyll and Hyde. So these first 4 were businesses that, for instance, Stumptown Station, they have no patio. So these are businesses that are the most challenged to reopen at 50% under phase 2 and maintain social distancing. You know, in the short time frame, these were the 4 that we analyzed, but we're not creating a system of winners and losers. There would be a application process where we would evaluate the location, the requested number of spaces, and then what safety measures would be required. So
what happens though that you dole out the 3 or 4 and then you get 3 or 4 other businesses saying, well, you're discriminating against me because you're letting them do it and not me? How do you begin to disseminate that?
So it will need to be first come, first serve. As I mentioned, we only have 12 planters. I'm not entirely sure how many planters we're going to need for each location. For instance, Stumptown Station, as I did some more research, bars are not allowed to open yet under phase 2. I was a little bit confused. Breweries can, but bars cannot. So we would not approve the measure there because they're not planning to reopen. just yet. But again, we only have 12 planters. Unless we were to, I know we're planning to order some at some point for that extension. I don't know when that's going to come.
Well, it's a possibility, Jay, that the restaurant itself, if they had the funds to do it, could acquire whatever barriers they needed to do that.
This is true. And I know Sante, I think, has one planter that's that Adam mentioned was their own, that's on Trade Street already. That's privately owned. So that is another option they have. Our goal was to avoid as much cost as possible. So just you don't want to defeat the purpose, essentially.
But the option lies with the restaurant owner.
Correct. And they will also need to provide the required definition of the areas where alcohol is consumed, whether that's retractable stanchions, rope, or what other mechanism they'll have to use to define the area. That would be up to them. And in decorating it any way that they choose to with flowers or whatnot.
Let me just add that, so we do have a motion. A second, I'll get to you, Commissioner Miller, in just a second. Normally, I would read this entire resolution. I think it's been covered pretty much in depth by Jay and Susan, so I'm not going to read it this time. The one request I have is that I would ask staff to very carefully review these so that an errant car doesn't quickly turn into a parking place, expecting it to be a parking place and run into some diners. So that's, let's make sure they're very safe. Commissioner Miller, do you have a comment?
I had a question. Jay, I would like to suggest that something as simple as reflective tape or black orange tape on the ground of their property line on the sidewalk and going out into the parking spaces with other barriers would be as good as stanchions. For example, a stanchion gets you through a line at a bank where you're channeling through and you're going to the next window. But if we have little discs we're supposed to stand on at Home Depot and Lowe's and Publix and Harris Teeter, and it's good enough in a grocery store, I would urge us to realize that it's probably good enough out on the sidewalk in a parking lot as well.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with those requirements, Commissioner Miller. I believe there may need to be a vertical barrier of some sort, fencing or other way to define it other than on the pavement, but we'll certainly look into what those requirements are, but that certainly an option, it sounds like.
Yeah, I would suggest that we do whatever is the safe, guarantees the safety, but is also economically as viable as possible, because we certainly don't want to over-engineer this and have a $1,000 parklet being made that's going to end up losing money for the business owner. Commissioner Bland.
Is this something we're going to make it's a temporary measure, or is this something that we're making this is the way it's going to be here and after? I'm like a 6-month time period that we're talking about, or until this COVID-19 problem?
It's phase 2 only, Commissioner.
Okay.
Commissioner Bland, it's only phase 2.
I'm with you.
I will add, since you asked Commissioner Bland, we did talk about parklets briefly last week. If this is something that the public, and the town really like, if it ends up being a good use of space, it could be an opening to look at some more semi-permanent parklet installations around town. But of course, this is like the mobility study. You're looking at allocation of resources and parking spaces as part of that. So I would look at this as sort of a very temporary test run to see how it goes, and we'll evaluate how it works out if we get any takers.
All right. A while ago, I believe Commissioner Miller made a motion and Commissioner McCool seconded. Is that correct? Lori? Let's go with that. We'll take a.
I think so, yeah.
We'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland, how do you vote, sir?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, let's go to 11C, consider contract for North Trade Street, Matthews Station Street intersection improvements. Susan Habena-Willard.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Commissioners. Jay, could you put that in presentation mode, please? Thank you so much. Everyone, I come before you tonight with the final step of the improvements to the North Trade Street and Matthews Station Street Improvements Project, and that is awarding the construction contract. 3 responses to the informal bidding process were received on June 2nd. Boggs Contracting Inc. was selected as staff determined their bid to be the lowest responsible bid. Staff is familiar with the contractor's work and the firm is qualified to do the anticipated work. The cost came in slightly under the engineer's estimate. A few commissioners stated during the April 27th meeting that they liked the red brick surface treatment option. Therefore, we specified in the project manual to use a red brick color in a running bond pattern. If anyone's interested in more details on that, please let me know. The contractor will supply a 3x3 mock-up, which we can make available to you at Town Hall. We anticipate construction to last about 60 days, which would end in mid-August should the board decide tonight to move forward with construction. Now, we talked last time about 2 different ways to construct the improvements, with keeping a lane of traffic open in each direction during construction or shutting down the entire intersection for construction. More details on this is provided in the next slide. Jay, if you could go back one, back, there we go. But before we move on to that one, I want to remind you that we'd previously discussed the funding for this construction would be with the Downtown Project CIP fund. This is the money originally set aside in case the board decided to build a parking lot next to the post office. However, it was discussed that the safety benefits of this project outweighed the parking. Now, Jay, if you would move on to the next slide. So again, 2 bids were requested from the bidders: the base bid to maintain traffic throughout construction, an alternate bid to close the intersection and detour traffic during construction. The selected bidders' costs were $351,202 to maintain 1 lane of traffic in each direction throughout a 60-day construction period, and $328,002 to close down the intersection throughout 45 days of construction using a detour on North Ames Street. Note that during the first option, there may be a couple of days that the intersection needs to be closed, but we'll try and schedule that for a time where less traffic is anticipated. So it's a cost difference of $23,200 and a duration difference of 15 days. The Transportation Advisory Committee has the following recommendation for the board's consideration. From the perspective of the traveling public, with all other things being equal, the TAC recommends that it is preferable that 1 lane in each direction remain open on North Trade Street during construction. Now, there's a third option that the contractor had offered up, and that is to try closing the intersection, so option 2, and if there's issues, revert back to option 1. There are safety and efficiency benefits to option 2. We have a good detour option that still provides access to businesses. However, some businesses, remember, have spoken out against closing the intersection during construction. As mentioned on the prior slide, the detour route would be on North Ames Street via West Matthews Street and West Charles Street. The intent is for public parking lot to remain open, as well as access to Matthews Station via Old Depot Lane. Our requested action tonight is for the board to authorize the town manager to enter into contract and also to select the base bid or alternate bid to handle traffic through construction. I'll be happy to take any questions at this time.
I have a question.
Yeah, can we come off the presentation mode, please? Commissioner McCool?
I believe myself and Mayor Higdon spoke about this briefly, but my big concern, because of COVID-19, businesses are already struggling, and I don't see, from what I see, I don't think it's a necessary project that we need to move forward with in the next 6 months. maybe even 12 months. I think we need to let these businesses get as much flow as possible and then come back to this in 12 months and rediscuss it then. I feel very uncomfortable closing that street while businesses, need as much traffic and as much foot traffic, as much car traffic as possible. So I would probably be in favor of pushing this off maybe 12 months to, next year's June 1st meeting.
Great.
Are there any other comments?
Oh, let's be devil's advocate. Since we've been kicking around the tires of the downtown being only 2 lanes, one in each direction eventually, would be a good test case. But I would put it to you that now that things are slower, would be better to mobilize now. As long as you're leaving 1 lane open in each direction, you're keeping access to the businesses. And the second point is you're also helping to stimulate the economy and putting a contractor to work with employees and doing construction work. You wait a year from now, and we're going to pray that we're in much better shape. We're going to be disrupting the town at a much better situation than they are right now. So I'll do the contradiction in terms with Commissioner McCool.
Well, I see your point. I think Mayor Higdon brought this to my attention is that we've really never even had many issues with safety at this intersection. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I just don't see this as a pressing issue that needs to be done as soon as possible. I mean, if I owned a business in downtown Matthews, I would be very stressed about what this could do to any potential traffic.
I think the stress is on the businesses is that is a very dangerous intersection. And I know talking to Rob at Seaboard quite frequently about people trying to cross the street and barely getting hit from that aspect of it. So I think we could find business owners that are equally as for as against in terms of safety of that intersection.
Yeah, I think ultimately we determined, or we had a discussion that when we actually looked at the number of accidents there weren't any, or there were very few, and perhaps we could address the safety concerns via lighting or something like that rather than redoing this intersection. I tend to agree with Commissioner McCool. I'm not in favor of moving forward with this right when we're coming out of COVID, because I think a lot of people will say, I'm not driving through downtown Matthews if I have to snake through 1 lane, and they're just going to bypass our downtown and bypass our businesses there. So,
well, I think like part of the problem is too is the little like yield sign for pedestrians is like 3 inches wide, so you can't really see it from the car. If we can make that bigger, that'd be, I think that would make a world of difference.
Has anyone who hasn't spoken on this topic care to chime in?
Susan has her hand up.
I'm sorry?
Susan has her hand up.
Oh, sorry. Hey, Susan. Yes.
Hi, yes, thank you. I would like to, if I may, address the comment about the statistics of intersection safety versus the perception of safety. I did mention that in the April meeting, and when we polled the community for their safety concerns in downtown, this intersection was by far the most commented on that people didn't feel safe crossing. And so even though statistically we may not have terrible crashes there, people do not feel safe. So I just wanted to clarify that that was the impetus of this project, is that we have numerous complaints where people don't feel safe crossing the street because the vehicles don't yield. That 3-inch sign cannot be made any wider because we have 4 lanes of traffic there, and the signs off to the side of the street are obscured by parked vehicles, and they're just frankly really far away from the travel lanes. So we did try and improve the lighting. I have not been downtown being told to stay at home. I haven't been downtown to check the nighttime lighting out there, but we did improve the lighting out there. And I think either Hazen or CJ, we're gonna go check on it and see if it did illuminate the crosswalks better.
Thank you, Susan. Would anybody like to make a, Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
What would I guess it's harder to do construction through the winter. Would that be an accurate statement, Susan?
It depends. We do run into an issue with the asphalt plants that tend to shut down for the winter.
I mean, if it's 60 days and freezing doesn't usually start until mid-October, is it something we could delay? You know, you were saying it would be finished by August, maybe start in August instead, or?
If that's what the board wishes, our intent was to wrap up all construction before the RNC comes into town and make sure those edges are cleaned up and everything is cleaned up before the RNC, which I believe is the end of August. So we were targeting mid-August to wrap up construction.
Commissioner Bland, I believe that you doubt the RNC is coming here.
I doubt it very seriously. But, you know, the other thing, much more important to me than the RNC coming to town is all those school buses that are going to be going up and down. I mean, my office is right there on the corner of, you know, Trade and Charles Street. And especially in the afternoons, there are just like one bus right after the other coming by there. That's going to create a huge problem if we wait until school starts to do that. That's the only thing I'm thinking about. But, you know, I'm not too concerned about the RNC causing this big traffic jams, but, you know, I think there's a project that we need to do, but at the same time, I'm concerned about funding issues, which I've expressed before. I do like the fact that it's come in for less money than we were thinking that it was going to be. I mean, to the tune of what, about $200,000 cheaper than what we're estimating?
$20,000 cheaper than we were estimating.
20?
So the engineer's estimate was 385 and the low bid was 350. So sorry, 35,000.
But didn't, Susan, you initially say this was going to be like a $500 and something thousand project?
Yes, initially with the way that construction prices were increasing at the rate that they were, if COVID didn't happen, we would be looking at a $500,000 project. And we don't know what construction prices are going to look like next year. Probably not going to be this low.
All right. Well, that's what I was saying. It looked like we're getting a much better deal than what was actually told us it was going to cost to begin with. But at any rate, this is a tough call. This is a tough one. I think that a lot of downtown businesses are hurting right now, but at the same time too, this may be the best time to do it. So close call for me.
Well, I will entertain a motion one way or the other. Someone care to make a motion? Commissioner Miller.
I'd like to lift up a question to the board. Could this be done in 2 votes? Could it be, do you approve the project? Most of us might say yes. And then should it be done as a second vote? Should it be done right away? Should it be done in 12 months when there are no school buses and people are on vacation next summer? For example, to Commissioner McCool's thought process. I can see it both ways, but I don't want to get bogged down in the details with and get them muddied.
I don't think the quote would be good, would it? I mean, that's for doing it right now is what they're, the quote that they've offered to do this.
So we would have to rebid it. I think if we don't, I think CJ's concerned it'll be higher when we rebid. Okay. When we first started talking about this, it was all about safety, and the board was very concerned about the safety of this intersection and the money. Just so the board knows, there is money in the CIP, $483,000 for downtown projects. Originally, it was for the parking lot. That seemed to lose favor or lose urgency. So there is money available for this project in this year's CIP.
Commissioner Urban.
I mean, that would be, obviously the bidding period will expire. You'll have to rebid it. I know for a fact that labor and material costs from the contractors that I'm talking to right now, either paving or vertical, are 5 to 10% less than they were in the market back in February or March. So you're going to have a compounded cost increase. To go to Jeff's point, you're going to have more people out and about later on. I mean, you either pull the trigger now or you realize you're going to be spending more money later.
Well, again, my concern is
waving. Clark is waving.
Okay, okay, Chief Bennington.
No, sir, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just trying to let you know. I think it's very important to remember where we started with this whole project with the downtown safety, and I can appreciate Commissioner McCool's ideas of trying to alleviate some of the pressures that I know our downtown businesses are feeling. But remember, this project started with Susan bringing this forward with some of the concerns of the safety down there, and then we did have a pedestrian struck just one block away from that intersection that really kind of propelled this thing to the forefront. I just don't want to let that kind of drop off to the side either, because we do believe that as the downtown starts to continue to grow, as we continue to see more foot traffic down there, and then to start putting construction barriers out there, once we see an increase of foot traffic, it may cause more congestion, more issues for pedestrians trying to cross. So the less traffic may be beneficial, although I do respect the commissioner's point on the business.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to two things. One is we don't have reports, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but we don't have reports of many accidents or any that I'm aware of where people have been struck there. So I think that was anecdotal. And I think that if we improve the lighting and things like that, we can address it. I'm very concerned for our businesses downtown that we start a major construction project in the middle of the summertime, which is peak season for people to come visit here. And I think a lot of folks will just drive around downtown and not stop here. And I don't think our businesses can take that kind of hit coming right out of COVID. So I do not support starting this right now. It may cost a little more later, but I think we have to support our downtown businesses. And I can assure you, if there's a major at that intersection, if you close that down to one lane and have cars slowly creeping through there for 2 months, people are just going to say the heck with it and not come downtown Matthews. I feel certain of that. So I cannot support doing this now. Again, I'll entertain a motion one way or the other if someone would like to make a motion. Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I've changed my mind. I will authorize the town manager to award and execute the contract with Boggs Contracting Incorporated to construct the North Trade Street Matthews Station intersection project using the base bid, where it would keep one lane in each direction open.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Miller. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Urban. Is there any further discussion?
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Susan, if we don't vote to approve this project, what other projects are at the top of your list that could take advantage of the low cost right now of construction?
That's a great question. We don't have any projects currently under development. CJ might have some, paving stuff that he might be able to use that money for, but we don't have any other projects in development at this time because of the cost. I see CJ's just popped on. CJ, do you have any projects that could take advantage of that?
I'm sorry. So thank you, commissioners. Mayor Pro Tem Gardner. So we would likely have some paving projects that we could start up pretty quickly. As far as other projects though, it takes a long time to get a project to this state to be ready to bid. So as far as construction projects, other than like resurfacing, it would probably take us 4 or 5 months to get something ready to go to bid.
Sidewalks or, I don't know. I guess I'm torn because I feel like it's an important intersection that needs to be addressed. At the same time, I do know business owners have major concerns about further bottlenecking. And I know we'll hear a lot about because I don't know how many days, if there are any days that go by where I don't have somebody ask about the Trade Street Bridge construction, and then starting a different construction project on the same road, even though it's further down. I don't know, I'm torn. So that's why I was asking if there was something at the forefront, like, we've talked about parking lots or expanding parking in areas that would be pretty simple to do. But, I'm sure they do take engineering and work behind it. So
Let me just say that we're going to discuss on the next agenda item the adoption of our budget, and we're underfunding our paving all over town. CJ, surely you need more money to pave. You can come pave my neighborhood. Our roads are falling apart, literally. I mean, I almost tripped and fell down and pieces of the road falling apart. So there's plenty of roads we can pave and take advantage of the low that aren't in our downtown business sector. Surely we could use the money for that if we wanted to take advantage of these bargain basement prices on asphalt.
Can I ask another question?
I have a question. Or you can use it for the Crestdale sidewalk that we lost $125,000 for.
Commissioner Bland, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to know if we said, yes, let's go forward with this project with the one lane open each way, would it be done before school starts?
That is the intent. The intent is to do all the construction in between this school season.
And I reflect on Mayor Pro Tem Garner's comment that this bridge has been under construction for years and it's not done yet. Commissioner McCool.
I think Jeff had a comment before me. I'll go first.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out, I hear everybody's comments, and this is a very difficult decision. However, we just approved the temporary restaurant seating, where a lot of the parking on both sides of the road, well, a lot of the parking in front of the restaurants is going to be occupied by dining room seating or people standing, etc. And so
only two, Jeff. Only 2 parking places per business.
All right, but if you have Temple Mojo and a few other along that side, I don't know. I'm just envisioning the parking being less and the walkability being enhanced, similar to the plans we've seen where they expand the sidewalk out, which we haven't done, but we've talked about it. And I think that it's going to be more of a walkable community for a while. My point being, if we expand the temporary restaurant seating, we're hurting the businesses, the downtown food and beverage businesses less.
Commissioner McCool.
I just want to kind of remind the board that, I've been born and raised in Matthews, and Matthews is just now kind of hitting that blossoming stage for businesses. So if we continue to put a further strangle on these businesses when it's so hard on them, I think it's irresponsible to put that pressure on them. If we want to, take care of our downtown, we want our businesses to continue to thrive, we have to make cognizant decisions that's, good for them too. And that's good for our town and our constituents and our tax base.
Commissioner Urban.
Well, I've been blamed for supporting downtown to a fault, and I would go to say that my biggest concern for the past 10 years is supporting downtown and doing everything I can to revitalize it. If I thought that this was going to jeopardize it, I wouldn't suggest it. But I remind the board, and to some members of the board that weren't here 6 months ago, is that we had put to rest additional parking to readdress this intersection, which has been one of the key focuses of the board for the last 2 years. If we divert funding to something else, for example, and ignore that intersection altogether, I think it'll do greater harm to the businesses who've been looking for the issue of, the literal versus physical issues around that intersection. The downtown has been burgeoning, obviously, and will continue to do so. But if we don't repair some of the things that they need done, that they've indicated they need done, has anybody reached out to Rob Jacent again and David Blackley and told them that we're going to keep one lane open in each direction as opposed to shutting it down? I don't know where that last aspect of it is, but we seem to be picking projects, we vet them very thoroughly, and then we kick them down the road again. I am not going to not vote for this particular intersection because it has been on everybody's radar. Chief Pennington has talked about it. Staff has talked about it. The board previously has talked about it. Apparently, I did not know, but during a Red Brick event, I was nearly hit and wasn't aware of it until someone told me after the fact. When are we going to take that risk and not realize that something's going to happen at that intersection?
You know, Commissioner Urban, I shared your opinion and was pushing to have this intersection done until I heard that our safety concerns were largely anecdotal and that there's not people being killed or hit here regularly. So I don't think it's that big of a deal as we might have thought it was previously. And so I think we've kind of beaten this to death. CJ, do you have a comment?
Sorry, right after you said that, I just wanted to, I guess, let everybody know that this road is a single lane in each direction, just a few hundred feet on either side from this intersection. So if you're traveling northbound, like 200 or 300 feet before you get to the intersection, it's one lane. And the same thing in the other direction. So it's already one lane in each direction. The only issue that we'll likely have are people turning left onto Matthews Station Street, blocking up traffic there. And maybe we can prohibit left turns to help with that.
Okay, did we have a motion?
Susan?
I made a motion.
Susan?
I do also want to remind the board that part of this project is to address ADA compliance issues. Granted that the bulk of the cost of the project is the asphalt and the surface treatment, but we still have crossings that aren't ADA compliant. And that's something that's bothered me personally since I've started at the town of Matthews and been trying to track down the best solution to those ADA issues, that they're real and they're there and they could really also get us into a big liability issue too, since we know that that ADA compliance is a problem.
I believe I'm correct, and correct me if I'm not, that there's many sections that are not ADA compliant. So this would just be one of them. Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
I'd like to, well, first, CJ, your point has convinced me that I do want to move ahead with this project. But I would like to correct you, Commissioner Urban. We didn't halt a parking project. We saw a mobility study that proved we did not need additional parking. And so we tabled the idea, but it wasn't halting parking in order to do this intersection.
The mobility study was done after we had already cannibalized the parking lot. The parking lot behind Domenico's, we had already scrapped that and refocused our attention before mobility study was even completed.
Okay, well, that was not this board.
No, I understand that, but I'm just deliberating on the dialogue and the timeline of what took place as to why this intersection took a lot of priority, even over the top of that parking lot.
So to be clear, a final question I have is one lane in each direction will remain open the entire time. Is that correct, Susan? In each direction?
One lane in each direction, if you select the base bid, will be open. However, we can't guarantee that there are some hours during some days that they might need to shut it down for safety of the traveling public and the workers. For some applications, our contractor is aware that keeping a lane open in each direction is part of the job, but I can't guarantee that there might not be 1 or 2 days where we have to do a detour, and we would schedule those for where we feel like there's the least amount of traffic.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. This question is for Susan. On the bid with Boggs, weren't they going to include in the bid addressing in that intersection the ADA compliance? Isn't that included in their bid?
Correct.
All right, so we don't need to add that to the motion, I guess. As far as the flagmen or closing down as opposed to one in each direction, that would be done usually before a certain hour and after a certain hour, so that you're not dealing with rush hour now that we're getting back to perhaps rush hour. I just wanted to address the ADA compliance to make sure, because that's something that should be in the Boggs bid, and she assured me it is, so I'll stay with the motion.
CJ, do you have a comment?
Sorry, I just want to clarify a little bit of what I think Susan was saying. The times that they would likely have to close the intersection are when they put the final layer of asphalt on there, and then when they put the topical coat on top to give a smooth appearance. those can likely be scheduled at night. I'm not 100% sure on that. Susan, maybe you can help, but I'm pretty sure those can be done at night in times when it wouldn't severely impact traffic through the area.
You know, it depends on the spec. We give a general spec for the surface treatment. So it would depend on the spec. The current supplier is saying that they can do 1 lane at a time, and it can be driven on as soon as it cures. A lot of times you have to have a temperature and rising. So overnight would be a temperature and falling. So I think it would just depend on the nighttime temperatures.
All right, let's wrap this up. We have a motion from Commissioner Miller. We have a second from Commissioner Urban to approve this and to go forward immediately. So we'll start the roll call vote. Commissioner Bland, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
No.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
And I vote no. So it passes 5-2 with the mayor and Commissioner McCool in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for the discussion.
And Miller voted yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. All right, let's move on to item 11D. Consider Matthews Station Street Retention Wall Project. Life Fitzpatrick. I believe you're on mute, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. How are you doing this evening?
Good.
I guess it was back in 2019. It seems like it was ages ago when we first brought this project to the board. The board was in favor of doing something with the retaining wall. At the time, we had proposed replacing it, but the board asked us to reconsider, approve funding to do some preliminary design and to look at other options for the retaining wall. So, Jay, can you go to the next screen? It's not letting me. So this is essentially the view of the retaining wall. That's it to the left. This is right in front of Town Hall. So after several meetings with the adjacent property owner, some design, and looking at some different design changes, staff is proposing that we actually eliminate the retaining wall, grade the area back, add a sidewalk to back of curb, and then also plant some trees in the area. The adjacent property owner does support this aspect of the project. We did go with different levels of projects that included some other amenities, but the adjacent property owner, this is what he was comfortable with approving or supporting for a project. So here you can see this is just the overhead view. The blue dots just represents where the sidewalk would be, and the green areas represents the area that we would grade. So essentially it would be the curb would be, or the sidewalk would be back of curb 5 feet. Then we would grade an additional area, and then it would be a moderate slope, a 3-to-1 slope, approximate, just depending on how far we end up going beyond the sidewalk with a flat area. And what this would do really is it would improve the connectivity, because currently there is no sidewalk there, and the aesthetics of the area I think would really open up that town green and help create a wider open space and really help with that placemaking that we're trying to achieve with downtown, especially with tourism and more walkability of it. Having that wall there, right now it's, it needs to be removed. It's in dire need of maintenance, but just eliminating it and just having the grassy area to the right really opens it up. And I think more user-friendly and more walkable for people using that side of the street and that sidewalk. So we're recommending that we remove the retaining wall and add sidewalk and grade the area. So this is the general view of what it would look like. And this is essentially standing at the intersection at the front right of Town Hall, looking at the area. So to the left is where Thai Taste is, and to the right is going towards Matthew Street.
Does that conclude your presentation, Live?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward what we're looking at. If I'm happy to answer any questions or go into any other details.
I've got a question. How many trees are you going to cut down?
The total number, essentially everything that's on
all of them.
everything on top of the hill will be removed, but we do include money to plant trees. What I discussed with Ralph is probably just continuing those maples that are on Matthew Station going out to Matthew Street, continue those around for just, you know, that visual appeal and continuation of that. And then we may even plant like a larger shade tree or something behind that area, a lot in that grassy area.
Commissioner Miller, do you have a question?
I did, thank you. Life, in your depiction of the corner view, how far back is the decorative fence? 30, 35 feet? And how much of that is their property versus right of way or our property?
So from along Matthew Station Street, from that curb where the retaining wall is, it's about 12 feet from that back of the curb is current right of way. Where that fence is on top of the hill, that was just a depiction. We may not do a fence. That's just something that was discussed earlier. And I just did some quick photoshopping and I couldn't remove the fence without drastically changing the picture. So I left it in there. That's just, I don't think we will put a fence in. Ultimately, that will come down to whether or not the property owner wants the fence up.
Okay, thank you.
But it's probably about 50 feet is what I think it is, 35 to 50 feet up that hill.
Commissioner McCool.
I from the angle, it looked like the sidewalk had been widened from the previous photo. Is there any work that's going to be done to the sidewalk? Or are you just taking out the wall? Or is there going to have to be redoing that sidewalk at all?
So from looking at the picture going to the right, there is an existing sidewalk that goes up to Matthew Station Street. We won't do anything with that. There was some other discussion in the plans, and again, it was adding some additional parking on that area, but we're not including that in part of this project. What we are doing is to the left there is removing the retaining wall and adding a sidewalk where one does not currently exist. So when you come from Matthew Station, you can just turn right, walk around where the retaining wall is and connect to the sidewalk that's right beside Thai Taste.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Urban.
Life, how far, isn't Jeff Fuller's property about 15 feet from back of curb, our back of curb, or somewhere's in there?
I believe it's 12 feet.
12 feet. So you're talking about grading onto his property another 15 to 20 feet?
Probably 30 feet, and he was okay with that. And we haven't finalized the exact starting point of the grade, but he understood why, and he liked the concept of it. So he's supporting it. Where exactly we start the grade, we haven't finalized yet, but it'll be in that range. We should have enough room to plant some trees at least.
And street trees, I don't have a problem. Obviously, I know Jeff's future plans, and the building would come up to the back of what would be an extended or wider sidewalk. So what you see is a green space. Maybe there's some public space there, some green space, but ultimately your depiction will be a lot different than what his thinking is down the road in terms of the building coming up to that street edge. So I don't have a problem with this. I'm just a little surprised that before he, a retaining wall would have protected his property a little bit. Now he's allocating 30 feet additional into his yard. There are going to be some trees impacted, probably to the chagrin of the mayor. So you might want to walk that, John. I'm not, just in case.
Well, I'm aware there's some really nice trees there. It's unfortunate that they'll be lost. And is there any flooding concerns? It looks like it's a direct wash down into our parking lot.
I don't think that once we get grass established, and then if we have the grade down at the bottom, I don't see an issue with flooding, but we hadn't looked at that.
All right, are there any other questions?
And
Renee, is your hand raised?
And this is tourism money based on the RNC?
That's what it was originally part of the RNC package that we proposed last year. Yes.
But now that we know the RNC, a really high probability it's not coming, isn't this a little disingenuous?
It's problematic.
I mean, I guess that would be the board's decision at that point, if we feel certain about that.
What they're saying now is that the RNC probably won't be able to get out of their contract. So at least some portion of it would be here. In which case, would that still be, could we still use those tourism funds?
Yes.
If I may, Mayor, how we were looking at this was the wall is needed, and because the RNC has not pulled out at this point, we felt like it was something that was worthwhile to continue to bring forward to the board. If the RNC stays, then we would be good to use the tourism funds. If the RNC goes before contracts could be completed, then we would ultimately need to use general fund dollars for this expenditure, but either way, it needs to be done.
Life, have we considered just rebuilding the retaining wall?
That was the original proposal, and the board asked us to look at other options, and that's where we went. And we had some design, preliminary design money approved, and that's where we went and we met with Mr. Fuller. And quite honestly, once we looked at the grading and how it would open up, we thought it'd be nice placemaking. I think it changes the aspect, you know, the look of the town green by having that space open.
Refresh my memory. We considered at one time a terraced seating area. Was that rejected by Mr. Fuller, or by, you know, making a stepped wall there where people could sit?
Yes, yeah, he's allowing us to do a temporary construction easement where we can do the grading, but he wants to retain full ownership and not provide an easement for public on his property.
So I want to be clear, how much does the town own behind the current retaining wall?
12 feet.
And that's not sufficient to do a terraced seating area or something? Or it's because of the easement for construction? Is that the concern?
Well, I think that 12 feet, if we were going to add a sidewalk, then we're down to a pretty small distance to do any seating or anything.
Okay. All right, any further comments, motions? Anybody like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion based on Ms. Hawk's recommendation of if it comes, if it doesn't come. So I'd like to go ahead. We motion to approve the budget ordinance amendment to allocate $55,000 of tourism funds for the completion of the listed project as outlined in Life's memo dated June 30th, 2020.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Urban, a second by Commissioner Miller. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
No.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
And I vote no as well. Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
So that passes 5-2 with Commissioner McCool and the mayor voting in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Life. We'll move on to 11E. Consider appointments for the Silver Line Task Force. This has been bandied about. I think all of you have been involved recently, at least. We initially started with 11 people. Is there a list, Lori, that we can throw up on the screen? Again, we have 15 people now. The last one, number 15, would be Bo Halsey from Matthews Building Supply. So this is the list, and it contains a couple of business owners, some developers, some neighborhood folks, 3 people from the planning board, and 3 from TAC. So the addition of the last 4 folks were to address some of the concerns some of the commissioners had when we initially presented this at our last meeting. So if we can go back out of presentation mode, I would entertain a motion to accept this as appointments to our Silver Line Task Force.
I need to make a statement before we make a motion.
Sure.
I was made aware that somebody was concerned about one of the people on the committee giving a $25 donation to my business, the Matthews Beacon. With the addition of David Blackley to the committee, David Blackley has given the Beacon far more money than that. And so I would like to make that public knowledge before somebody says otherwise.
Fair enough. Commissioner Miller.
I'll make a motion to approve the Silver Line Advisory Committee as presented tonight, numbers 1 through 15. Thank you.
And could you add that number 15 is Bo Halsey from?
Yes, sir. So done. So moved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote if there's no further discussion. Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Whitley? You keep moving around, Mr. Whitley.
Yeah.
And I vote in favor as well. So that will be our task force. I talked to Dana Stujenki this afternoon, and one thing did happen. I know Commissioner Miller, you were kind of doubtful about how fast we had to move forward with this, and lo and behold, DOT has said, "Hey, we don't need to know this by July. We don't, we can have a few more months." So that's good. This committee will be able to meet in a more reasonable time schedule to meet over maybe 2 months, and so they'll meet every week or every other week, and it'll make it a probably more better input for
I think
citizens.
that we all had input, and it's the best of the best.
Okay, very good. So this will, according to Dana, could end up rolling into August or even September before we have to make our final decision on what our locally preferred alternative is. So we do have some additional time, and that's great. All right, we're going to move on to new business. Item 12A, consider adoption of the fiscal year 2021 general fund and tourism budget ordinance, CIP and fee schedule. And Hazen, you want to start this?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. Proud to present the budget to everyone. Everybody's worked very hard on this. The latest change to the budget is a request to fund early in the budget process. I took out $40,000 from the Ottawa Volunteer Fire Department over late last week. We were asked to put that in. The way we did that is Chief Kinneberg is going to fund about $15,000 of small capital improvements for Ottawa out of this year's budget, $15,000. And then we sought and found $25,000 in the general fund budget, obviously the fiscal year 21 budget. And the way we did that is we made additional cuts to the workers' comp premiums and the property and liability premiums. So we are recommending approval of the general fund tourism CIP fee schedule. And then the staff is directed to come back to the board in December, and we'll discuss the kind of the financial condition of the town year to date with the possible consideration of a 3% merit. And that is in contingency, that 3% merit is in the contingency funds.
Could we come off? Yeah, thank you. I did send to each commissioner the letter from the treasurer of the Ottawa Volunteer Fire Department. And I asked if you guys had any, I told you my rationale for including it. I thought it kind of bothered me. I kind of felt like a public safety issue where they might not be fully staffed where they should be. Really impacts a lot of our citizens, especially over where Commissioner Whitley lives, and I guess Commissioner Urban as well. So I think the a good compromise. It doesn't really, it's, we're getting 15,000 from this year's fund, and then realizing the savings on the insurance for next year. So I only got a few comments. Those of you that did comment said, yeah, good. Nobody else commented. So I will entertain a motion to accept our fiscal year 2020-2021 budget.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question before we vote. I'm satisfied with the budget. I think they've done a good job in coming with the recommendation of what they have now and finding cuts. My question is to Hazen. Did we send a letter to DOT for the Crestdale sidewalk completion, $125,000?
So what the board asked me to do is reach out to our town attorney and ask him to prepare a letter. And I forwarded that information to Charlie late last week. And Charlie and I have not had a chance to further talk about it. I don't know if, Charlie, are you aware of that email or?
Yes, I am aware of that email today, Hazen. Thank you. Yes.
Well, Charlie, could I ask you, last May, this money was appropriated and went on the DOT agenda to be funded to Matthews. And, you know, at that time, I was under the impression, and Representative Hunt was under the impression, that the money was given over to Matthews, and only to find out now that the money was left over there. Now they're saying that the funding is tight, which I understand that, but if the money was allotted to Matthews, my only concern is I was told, and I told my congregants and the community, that the money was funded for that. And I try to be a man of my word when I say something, but I was under the impression for a whole year that the money was in the town of Matthews. And what I was asking, and I think it would be more credence coming from our town attorney, if you were to write a letter to them and whatever words you might need to say or would like to say, not only, I just want the money back. I want our money back.
Well, I understand, Commissioner, and that's what Hazen and I will have a meeting and formulate appropriate correspondence to the DOT.
And
thank you.
Charlie, could I ask that we make that a priority? Because I share Commissioner Whitley's concern that we kind of promised the community that we were going to build this trail, and then all of a sudden we don't have money that we thought we had. So I hope if for some reason DOT does not give us this money, which is certainly possible, seeing their current balance book, I hope this board will reconsider if we can fund that from some other source when we meet, I guess, at our mini conference in October, because I am very uncomfortable. We promise a community something, we thought we had the money, and then it's gone. So I hope we'll keep that in mind. Commissioner Miller, you're muted, sir. Jeff, you're muted. Jeff, we can't hear you.
We did have the money, and I would ask Hazen if on the request and the reply to please BCC the whole board.
Oh, of course.
That's a good request.
Of course.
Thank you.
Also, Hazen, am I correct that we have already started on this project and we spent quite a few dollars already for design? I know I got design on my wall at the church, and I think, but aren't we already pretty much far along in this project?
We are. The issue is that the money that came from the House side went through DOT, and DOT operates on a reimbursement process with their grants. And Commissioner Whitley, rightfully, I get the confusion, but we'll work very hard to get the money back. And it's still not to say, even if we don't get the money back, that the staff's not going to recommend doing the project.
I got you.
Fund the money through our general fund, and maybe we still hold their feet to the fire. Like, look, maybe we get it in 2 years, but
Yeah, that's my long as we get the money. It's our money, it's our money that was given to Matthews, and because they go bad, they still need to give our money. But I'm satisfied with if the project's still going forward and moving forward with that, so that we can complete that and move forward, because that new Crestdale Heritage Trail is a beautiful trail, and And I see people that I had never seen before. I stopped, they come by the church, we talk, just coming through there. But I know it's a great asset to people that will come through for the community, and just not just the people live in Crestdale, but all the people, 3 blocks from downtown, from Town Hall. It's a win-win for everybody. Thank you much.
Yeah, I share Commissioner Whitley's frustration because it's not DOT's money to take. The money was awarded to the town. It's not theirs. They need to get their paws off our money and let's get the money back in town where it belongs. All right, so we have the considering the adoption of this budget. Did we have a motion to accept yet? I don't believe so. Would someone like to make that motion, Commissioner Miller?
I'll make the motion to approve the fiscal year 2021 general fund and tourism budget ordinance, CIP and fee schedule as prepared by Town Manager Hazen Blodgett. Further, staff is directed to report back to the town board at the December meeting regarding the financial condition year to date, which is typical, at which time the town board will consider the adoption of merit adjustment effective January 1st. The estimated cost of the market adjustment is about $174,000, which is already included in the budget as a contingency.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Miller, second from Commissioner Whitley. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Bland.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
Yes.
Commissioner McCool.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes as well, so that passes unanimously. I'd like to thank staff for all their hard work. I know this is a really tough budget year. We appreciate you working with us, and also appreciate all the commissioners' willingness to consider some of these last minute changes we made. I think in light of the current environment, this is a pretty good budget for this is a tough year for sure. So thank you. Let's go on to item 12B, consider implementation of a committed vehicle lease fund balance. Ms. Blair.
Mayor, I'm going to start out on this, and then depending on the question, Beth can jump in. But so what we did in this fiscal year, which is the 2020 budget, we went to a new lease program that the board approved. We budgeted $360,000. We paid up somewhere around 12 months of leases. And so one of the steps we need to take is we need to create a committed fund balance that would dump this $307,000 that's still in this year's budget into this fund. And then in next year's budget, when we have lease vehicles, we'll continue to dump money in this fund. And that's what will guarantee that we will have funds available to pay future lease payments on kind of primary one is our police vehicles. So, and then we'll need the board will need to approve a budget ordinance that shows this as a loan on our books. But this is, it's an accounting procedure that gets us square with the auditors.
Okay. Can we come off of the presentation mode, please? Are all of my fellow elected leaders as confused as I am? Beth, maybe you can explain how this is an accounting procedure and what we're doing here exactly.
Sure. If you think of it as a loan, like you would get a loan for car purchase, that you, in essence, it's enterprise fleet management that we're leasing the vehicles from. So in essence, they're loaning us the money. So we put it on according to the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. A municipality, when they're leasing vehicles like this, they put the loan, if you will, on the books as revenue, and you show then a corresponding liability that you have to pay that loan back over time, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. I think I understand it now. With all deference to our town manager, I think you explained it a little bit better. Does everybody else understand what we're doing here? I'm seeing some general nodding. Commissioner Miller?
I just have a simple question. I don't feel that leasing a vehicle is to our financial benefit because one never owns the asset. In other words, when I pay off my car, I own it for another 6-7 years. Help me understand why you feel differently, anyone in staff.
I'm happy to take a stab at that. So this was an evaluation process that we went through in looking at the typical maintenance costs that you start to incur when you have a vehicle start to age. So typically the first 5 years of a vehicle, you've got all of the warranties in place. Things tend to hold up a lot better. And so we have historically had the purchase outright and kind of run it into the ground approach to vehicles. But what we were finding was that these older vehicles are actually costing us quite a bit of money from a maintenance standpoint. So we decided to embark on this pilot program with Enterprise to try this out. A lot of other communities have done this for years, and they find that they are able to sell the vehicles after 5 years when they're kind of at peak market value, and we get those proceeds back. And so then we put that back into the fund to help then pay for future vehicle purchases. So instead of selling a vehicle for $500 essentially for scrap, we're selling it when it's got more value, and we're able to put that back into the program. So Enterprise also helps us with analytics to track these maintenance costs, track what it's actually costing us to be in this program. And so we want to give it a few years and see how it's working for us. So far, our staff has been very, very happy with the level of service that we've received from Enterprise through this process. But it's something that we could back out of over time if we found that we just weren't getting the returns that we expected out of it.
Thank you.
Becky, you and I also had a conversation, and you said that our police department, or maybe the chief wants to talk about this, actually have parts cars, cars that aren't even drivable that we just keep for spare parts.
We do. Yeah. If Clark wants to talk about that anymore, I'm happy to
Come on, Clark.
I mean, I guess the point, Becky did a great job explaining this. You got to think about the amount of hours that we put on an engine of a police car. Officers are driving or at least operating that vehicle 12 hours a day. It's not just the miles, it's the hours. And we are seeing our fleet depleting its usefulness, I should say, after 5 years. So this program, and if we try to keep it and get the most out of it, we're really not getting the bang for our buck, as Becky said, when we go to auction. So this program, we're hoping, is going to be a huge, significant increase or improvement, I should say, in maintaining our fleet. And while they are still under warranty, those repairs are covered. So we should be able to save on repair costs over the long run.
Yeah, I can say as a proud owner, original owner of a 1974 Dodge Coronet, that the maintenance cost goes up considerably after a few decades. Jeff, you've driven a car for a long time as well, so maybe not that long. So I'll entertain a motion to consider implementation of a committed vehicle lease fund balance. Anybody like to make that motion? Ken? We have a motion from Commissioner Bland. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. I'll take a roll call vote now. If there's no further discussion, everybody understands the motion. Commissioner Bland?
Aye.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
Commissioner McCool?
Yes.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
And Commissioner Miller?
Okay.
And I vote yes as well. That passes unanimously. So thank you very much. We're getting near the end, so hang on. We'll move on to item 13, the mayor's report. I just have one item to mention. These are some very difficult times. We had the peaceful rally in honor of George Floyd at Town Hall on Sunday, and I'm happy to say that all commissioners were present. We all have obviously differing viewpoints on what's going on now in the world, but I'm happy to say that everybody showed up to show our general support and our stand against police brutality. And I want to apologize for not recognizing you when I gave my speech. I should have recognized each of you by name, but I think I was just about to pass out from a heat stroke at the time. But I do appreciate everybody showing up. We're getting a lot of questions. I know I've seen a lot of emails going back and forth. The community is asking us a lot of questions. So these are difficult times. I know particularly for Chief Pennington and Hazen and Becky, we're working on responses to the community. I think we're blessed that our community is not a hotbed of any sort of issues with our police. We have a very solid police force under very excellent leadership.
Yes.
And so again, I appreciate everybody for showing up. That was a nice show of support for our community. Again, does not mean you necessarily believe one way or the other, but it just shows that we all are willing to listen, and that's what's important right now.
It is.
Thank you very much for showing up, and that's all I have for the mayor's report. Attorney's report. Charlie, do you have anything?
I have no report, Mayor.
Thank you. Town manager report. Hazen?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, could I say something just a minute before we go? I want to personally thank all of y'all as a person of color in town of Matthews, and especially on the board. What you see happening all across America is not totally just for George Floyd, but it's years and decades of injustice, prejudice, and biases. And I was honored to see all of my fellow commissioners there. And so long America has not addressed or even sit down and talk about racism and bias and prejudice and injustice. And especially one of the things that I always ran on, and I still stand for it, and as a person of color who came up in the 70s and the 60s and segregated schools and coming on the highway patrol in the mid 70s, it was tough. And unless you're walking in that, but what the frustration is that so much has been going on, not just from the killing, and that certainly is what brought the highlight to it, but just the injustice, and people want to be treated fair. We want to be treated fair. And that's my stand. And I feel certain that I feel a lot of you feel that too. I've now been with y'all going on 5 years. I broke bread with every one of you. I buried some of your family. I married some of you, and I talked and counseled with some who's had some marital problems and stuff. But I feel close to this town of Matthews. I feel close to all of y'all. And it's just time. It's a time for change. And I thank Matthew. I always, in anything I do, I like to be first. I like to be out front, not for bad, but for good, and to make things better. Hayes and I talked several times about, we want all of the 6 surrounding towns with Charlotte. I want Matthews to be the #1 town. I want us to lead the way in whatever it takes for us to be the best. And I think we are the best. I believe we have that quality of people here. And I want to personally, from y'all to me, from me to y'all, thank you for coming and showing up and being part of the crowd and being part of the solution. We're better today than we were yesterday. And that's all I want to say. Thank you, fellas and ladies. I appreciate all of you so very much.
Love you, Larry.
I love you too.
Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie.
Thank you, Larry.
Motion.
Now, would anybody like to call it a night, or are we just gonna play cards?
Yeah, I like it. I make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay, motion from Commissioner Bland. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Miller. Unfortunately, I have to call roll call once again. I got my hand slapped by trying to bypass this. So, Commissioner Bland, how do you vote? Would you like to adjourn or not?
Yes, I would.
Yes, okay. Commissioner Urban?
Yes.
Yes. We're
Yes.
getting tired, guys. Mayor Pro Tem Gardner says yes. Commissioner McCool?
Yes,
Yes.
And
yes.
Whitley's already yes. And Commissioner Miller, you ready to call tonight?
Yes.
I am as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We do have a great town. I appreciate all of you, the elected officials and staff. Thank you and good night.
Thank you guys. Have a
Good
good
night.
night.
Be safe, everybody.
Thank you, Charlie.